matter who you are, where you are, what your choices have been, and what karmic timelines and contracts you have journeyed, the light is calling for the reunification of all aspects of life in this realm now. It is calling for the cleansing of all polarities. It is calling for the rising of all sacred heart centers now. All are being summoned home to the greater light now.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Whole Soul Mastery's Sounds of Circles Heart Sharing in the Roundtable podcast today. I'm Marie Moeller, and I'm an author, intuitive, and the host of this Whole Soul Mastery's podcast series. And I'm here today with Paul and Nancy Panzica, and I'm here with Sharon Ramesbottom as well. And I'm so grateful to be gathering in June 2021 with you. And I mean, my favorite word in the world, I think, just because I feel the energies of this, is epic. There is just an epic amount of change, energy. You know, we're feeling seeds of so many new things, and we're also witnessing seeds of old creations that have manifested and come to fruition. And we're in a time of making room for this new energy while we also witness the release of the old. And we're all experiencing that a little differently based on our own unique soul signature and the lessons we've learned and the soul gifts that are returning to us. So, I mean, epic. Like, it's an epic experience to be us right now. And I want to thank our listeners for joining us in this conversation. I wanted to start today by planting the seeds, the awareness of what keeps coming to me is the energy of presence and preparation. And at first I heard those two words when I was getting ready to get on this podcast. In the last 24 hours, I've really felt this energy, presence and preparation. And then it came through that presence is our first preparation. You know, it is our foundational, it's the starting point. It's the new terrain. It's like this energy inside us that wants to ground who we really are, because that is the gift that we bring to any interaction we're having, anything that's flowing through, any change that's arriving on our doorstep and into our life experiences. And so I just wanted to see that as a backdrop to the conversation. We can really focus in on presence and preparation. And I know, Nancy, and you, Paul, you always bring some of the astrological pieces, because we've just been through a solar eclipse, this ring of fire energy this past week on the 10th of June. And we're also looking towards the solstice towards the end of June, but not too far away here. So we're in this powerful energy time. And I want to invite you guys to share a little bit about what you're experiencing, your perceptions of preparation and presence. What's in your hearts to say?
Got anything to say? Okay, I'll start. So we're all going to get crucified. That's what I see coming. We're looking at the 20th actually of June, which is when the solstice occurs, and that's going to be at 10:30 in the evening, Central Standard Time, where we live. So there is There is some really strange alignments, which I've never seen in my life, which are going to occur that are timed specifically to that moment. So, I mean, if you understand how fast some of these planets and celestial bodies move, then it's astounding to see that around 10 o'clock at night on that day, on the 20th of June, the alignments just come right into place. And then, and so the way I look at the astrology of things is that there's a reason why we call it tropical. And the reason why we call it tropical is that it's seasonal, and that has to do with turning 360 degrees throughout a year. So every time we go to about 90 degrees, we make a turn, and then we make a turn, and we make a turn. So it forms a cross, right? A cross forms. And so it makes sense to look at the astrology from a seasonal perspective. And also, if you have like in really interesting things, like we just had a lunar eclipse, which I thought was amazing, and then we just had a partial solar eclipse. That's interesting too. But this tone for this season is set at that moment, what the astrology is at that moment. So at that moment, we're seeing something really astounding. And what we're seeing is a cross forming. It's called a grand cross. And it's forming. That's when you actually have two oppositions 90 degrees from each other, forms a grand cross. And it forms a grand cross, and the moon is helping to activate this. The moon moves very fast. So it's not there in the morning, it's not there in the afternoon. It's there right around the time that we hit the solstice. In fact, I would say the solstice is going to be defined by the grand cross.
Wow.
In my limited experience, Nancy has a greater experience than I have on this, is that not a lot of people talk about grand crosses because they're two oppositions. And two oppositions, an opposition itself is kind of looked at as arduous. But then you have two oppositions squaring each other. Oh, who wants to deal with that? It's too much to deal with. So a lot of people just say, get through it, we won't focus on it. But I'm focusing on it, and it's like I said, it's astounding. So crosses are either cardinal, fixed, or what they call mutable. In the astrology, there's 12 symbols of the zodiac, or 12 sections in the sky, and that is 3 crosses that and in fact there's 3 crosses embedded within the astrology. And so what we're looking at is we're looking at the middle cross, called a fixed cross, and it's related to fixed astrology, or the fixed signs of the astrology. So we're smack dab in the middle of this cross that is going to form on the 20th of June. And honestly, when I look at it, it turns out to be something that I've been trying to teach students for the last 10 years, is the mystery of this cross. In fact, we call it the mystery of the cross. Well, the mystery of this cross is going to manifest on this date and at this time. So I've heard somebody else call it, it's a beautiful name. It's called a tetramorph. And then a tetramorph is going to manifest at that moment. Now, it won't last for long, but it's creating a signature of the season. The tetramorph is going to manifest at that exact moment. The other amazing part about that is that overlapping that cross, focusing at one of the corners where the moon is at, you're going to see a grand trine appear. So you're going to have a grand trine superimposed on top of a grand cross. I've never seen anything like this in astrology. I guess it happens, but to happen exactly at that same moment with exactly these signs that I've been teaching for like 10 years, what is this? This is like magic to me. And looking at it going, it could have happened a month before, or could have happened 3 days later, but it's happening at exactly that precise moment. So that kind of forces us to look at the mystery of who we really are. And who we really are is not who we think we are. So we know who we are. I'll tell you that right now. We know who we are. But many people walking around look in the mirror and they think that's who they are. And they say, I have a body, right? I have a physical body, and then I have some kind of biochemical reactions which are occurring in my brain, which constitutes my mind, and they leave it at that. Well, that's not what we are. And that's what this cross is representing. The cross is representing the 4 bodies of the human constitution. It's also in the Bible, and it's the vision of Ezekiel. Ezekiel saw in the sky wheels spinning around. What he saw was the astrology of the thing. Everything's spirals, it spins. And so he saw astrology, and he saw the human being in 4 forms. He saw the human being as a man, as a lion, as an eagle, and as a bull. And the 20th of June, that's what the cross forms. It forms what we call the tetramorph of the human being. Now, I could go into it, but it gets way more esoteric, and I'm not even sure that it's going to really help us, because it's like Nancy and I were talking about this. It's like a birth, or it's like something that's going to happen. You can't stop it from happening. It's going to manifest whatever way it manifests. We just have to either get through it or harness the energy or learn through this energy. What are you going to do? What can you do about it, right? But I do think that there's assistance there, because again, there's this trine, which trines are all magnificent, and the trine is in water signs, which are healing signs, and it's all converging on the moon, and the moon is really what represents the human soul. So the human soul is going to feel this gravity, all of this weight coming down on us, and you're literally going to feel like you're nailed to a cross. You can't run or hide from this, and yet you're going to also get this massive amount of healing energy, which is going to occur also. And so, I don't think we'll feel it that moment. Maybe we will, I don't know. But I think that sets the tone for the summer. I think those are the energies of the summer that we're going to be looking at, and helping, maybe it'll help us to find out or discover all of the bodies that we are. We're not just a physical body, but we have these 3 energetic bodies. And these 3 energetic bodies are extremely important, or they're all important, but we need to start understanding how we can gain insight to those bodies, because that's the only way we're going to heal ourselves and ascend beyond the point that we're at. I think I'm going to leave.
There's so much that you share that's so rich, and really has to be I just sort of drink it in when you speak, because I remember as you speak the truth of what you share. And we all remember, that this is all very familiar to us, and yet it isn't always our language. But when you bring it into language, we can all experience that. And I have many things to say, and I want to hear from you, Sharon, too. But the last thing I was thinking when you talked about these 3 energy bodies, and a lot of people aren't tapped into that right now. But it makes me think, as an athlete, because I was an athlete in high school and college, and I would break a little toe or a finger or something, right? I had a pin put in my thumb one time, right, because of a softball injury, and you'd be amazed how important, like, your fingers, your toes are, but you don't realize it until all of a sudden one's not functioning, or it's really painful. And how you adjust your life to allow for that healing process to occur. And I think this is that epic biblical moment. We've been referencing Noah, the guides have been talking about Noah and the transmissions, many things. And so there's been all these stories. There's I think the Bible in many ways was forecasting human evolution and coming back to God over this last 2,000 plus years. And all those stories, though, are also very relevant to us now. They're really, they've been for all the versions of us that might have lived in the past 2,000 years, but it's really relevant now because this stuff is manifesting. We are in the time of revelations. We are in this time of coming back to God and realizing that we are spiritual beings having these human experiences. And for many people, that is a distant consciousness or some kind of haze or smog in their field, but something they can't really feel or access or tap into. And what you're describing about this, did you say the mystery of the cross, this grand cross? It seems like, of course, God, source, creator, the great mystery, however people refer to this powerful omnipresence, this, creator of the creation, is calling us home. And it's going to call us home, and we're going to feel the weight of the baggage that's keeping us away from that union. So it sounds like in the astrology, I just wanted to ask this question to hear your perspective. it is a mystery. Like, we don't know how we will experience this moment, is what you're saying. There's not necessarily an emotion connected to it, or a forecast of certain things that we might see. It sounds like we're going to go into an experience, right? We're summoned into an astrological, celestial, divinely spiritual experience, and wherever we are vibrationally, we're going to have our experience of that. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know what he's saying, but I think that's where looking at how the astrology fits in with your own chart can help give you guideline as to what it means for you personally, right? So you can talk about all of this going on cosmically, energetically, and then you compare that to your own chart to see ways that you can help determine your path forward through it, or how you're feeling it. You know, it can define your actions, your physical existence. It can define your emotions. It can define your thoughts. It can affect all of those pieces, or just one or two of them, depending on where it sits on your own personal chart.
Yeah, Nancy's right, though. I mean, you have to feel your way through it. So as we start to ascend our conscious, our entity, astrology becomes intuitive, because you don't even have to look at this chart to know what's actually going on. You can feel it as these energies start to affect you. So, you know, a lot of times we just use it many times for validation. We go, okay, yeah, this is weird. Let's see what's going on. And this is, yeah, it's no surprise to us. This is what we're seeing. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say a perfect example. You're talking about how connected you've been feeling, both of you, over the last 2 weeks, how much possibility, how much hope, how much change. And personally, my last 2 weeks were the exact opposite. They're heavy. They're pulling things up. They're difficult. And I don't look at my own chart. I mean, I pretty much have an idea of what's happening, but I don't look at my own very often. And so I pulled up the chart, go, what is this? And it turns out that where Pluto is at right now Pluto's very slow moving. So you don't usually feel it in the moment. It's more like it defines maybe a time period, right, of your life. But I happen to look, and it is the exact degree opposite my sun. So that happens only once in a lifetime, because Pluto is so slow. And the last time it was this antagonistic I was 17 years old. So that was quite a long time ago.
Before I met her.
So yeah. So here I am, just feeling this, tearing apart this, I've always been, he calls me optimistic or hopeful, and I'm full of faith. I can see, I'm very patient, and I can wait for the outcome. And these last 2 weeks have been tearing that all down. And now I can look at the astrology, like he says, and says, oh, okay, that's why. There it is. It's right there. So what each person feels from it, or can utilize the energy to do with it, varies. Right.
But Marie, you also asked a profound question, so I'd like to try to answer that. You talked about a mystery, right? And what does that mean? And so we can even take it further than that, and we can say that life is a mystery. But in order to gain higher knowledge or higher awareness, you're forced to cross certain thresholds that not everyone's prepared to cross. And so, there was a time where let's say, ennobled or ascended knowledge was only given to people that were prepared to take the journey. I think right now, the entire humanity is going to be offered that chance to transcend into a higher state of knowing or consciousness. But in order to be successful in that, you have to face some unpleasant things. And that's one of the problems that we see with, unfortunately, the New Age movement and a lot of these ascension movements, which you actually address these things. But many people have a tendency to bypass or ignore what they feel is unpleasant and only focus on positive things. But by doing that, they're just basically propagating a fear that because they've never addressed the darkness. And so I think we're kind of at that point now where the darkness is going to be faced. But I did want to bring this up because I think that for me, when I saw the cross and I started meditating on all of these things, it brought back a biblical passage, one of my favorite passages. And so I'd like to read it, if that's okay.
Please.
So this is from Matthew. And this is the undeniable fact that we're dealing with right now. And it says, if anyone wants to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world yet forfeits his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? I think we're living in this moment now. You can apply this moment to any time in the past, but this is the moment that this passage is written for. Because if you want to take the path, you have to understand what he's saying in this passage. It's called the second death. Something within you has to die. Now, what is that something within us that has to die? Well, you know, I could read something that you wrote. This is what you wrote. You said, what will steady the heart and hearth of a planet and all life upon it when the foundation upon which it was darkly and densely built is exposed, when the illusion is unveiled and all the systems that feed into it are revoked, revealed, charged, arrested, and removed or dematerialized? And your answer is union with source. So, and then you go on to explain how that actually manifests in the physical world. That is the second death. And so what we're talking about, and a lot of people talk about this, and I think there's a lot of confusion regarding it, is that if you look at it from an Eastern perspective, and I don't want to name names, and honestly, there's truth within that also. But this idea that we have to destroy the ego, that we have to negate the ego, and then we just become one with pure consciousness, and you know, the ego has to be nullified and all these other things. That's not the path that we're talking about. Now, what happens if you nullified your ego? Then there's no Paul anymore, and there's no Nancy, there's no Sharon. We don't have a personality. There's no Marie. The person, and in order for us to function in this physical life, and in order for us to bring forth the physical realm into the kingdom of heaven, we still have to maintain our independence, our individual self. So you don't nullify the ego, you don't kill the ego. Yeah, it has to become integrated, or in another way to look at it is you have to crucify that the what we'd say is the reign or the supremacy of the ego, or the infrastructures that manifest that egotistically. So when you ascend, you're still who you are. It's just that you no longer identify you talked about this, you talked about your will versus God's will. So you no longer follow your ego's will anymore. That is about as simple as that. So a person can do that and let go of that, and then they become a person who is following. I would go further than that. I mean, I'd say that's God's will, sure. But remember that the will that you're following is the will of your spirit. That's your higher self. And so that is God's will. That's the law of oneness, and that's the law of love. But you're following yourself's, your higher self's will. You're following what you know better. And you say this in your transmission, you say, you know, we're like the last planet in the universe, or at least planets that are going through this, where we're still following we're following ego's will. But when you're following ego's will, you're following the archon's will. You know, the ego creates the archons. So create an archon, Lucifer, Satan, Ahriman, Belial, you know, create an archon and follow that, and it'll empower you to a certain degree, but you cause chaos in the wake of that of that energy. So what we're being invited to do is we're being invited to help to slay the power, which is draconian, that the ego wields. But we're not going to kill the ego. We're going to integrate that into our life, and we're going to reverse the flow. You and I have talked about this. Reverse the flow of consciousness. That's happening. And maybe that's what you guys are feeling. But the flow of consciousness, which I think has to do with the magnetic field of the earth, is destined to reverse itself. The polarities are going to reverse. Instead of flowing from masculine to feminine, we're looking at feminine to masculine flow, which has to be reinstated in that way. So I think that's the mystery that we're to a certain degree, facing. Not everyone's going to want to do it. Not everyone is going to embrace this, but those who aren't embracing it are having a miserable time right now. The world is crumbling, and they don't know. They're looking for something to grab onto, but they can't, their mind can't see it, but their heart can feel it. If they allow their heart to lead them, they'll be able to transform. They'll be able to ascend.
Thank you. I have some things I want to share, but Sharon, I'd love to hear from you, please.
Well, there's a lot here, so thank you. Thank you. There's a couple of things that I'll just came to me as the wisdom was flowing. And when you're talking about the cross, the visual that I had was we are the cross, that we are, the horizontal line is humanity, the vertical line is, our connection and our beingness, and then our heart is, of course, the middle of the cross. And so it is a rebirthing. This is how I'm feeling. And it is an integration of our ego self, of which we surrender, we let go, and we allow. And in that space of allowance, of complete surrender, our true self, our higher self, is able to braid in, and we are becoming who we truly are. And this is the time that we are doing it. We are going to be divine in form. And we're all doing it at different varying degrees and at different times. And if you look at it, it's perfect, because if we all did it at the same time, that would be a huge shift. And so we're doing it in ways that we're able, I think, to support the whole, not only on Earth and humanity, but galactically, universally. And so I think it's all unfolding perfectly for each one of us. And bringing it back to what you were talking about, presence and preparation, it is our presence that prepares us for the next moment. It is in the moment that we become. And so it is each moment I feel that we are rebirthing. We are just becoming more and more and more of who we truly are. And so we're being supported astrologically, and thank you, Paul and Nancy, for all of that explanation, because you were talking and I could see how everything is being supported for us energetically, because we're source energy beings. And so energetically, I feel that we're being supported at this time. And the way that I'm preparing for it is by trying to love myself and others as much as possible, and to be compassionate and patient and tolerant for myself in the moment, and allow the release of everything that is needing to leave, and receive, be in complete receptivity of everything that is available to bring in, and to trust that we're supported and guided and encouraged, and we've got a fan club, right? And they're cheering us on. And yes, there's, the old is crumbling, but we chose the old. We were players in that game, and we are rebirthing. And it's a beautiful time, and it's not easy. It's not easy. It's just, how can it be easy for the first time to anchor the divine in form? How is it possible? And we're doing it. And we're doing it by incremental, steps. And so everybody's journey is beautiful and is unfolding perfectly for them. And I just feel that we're kind of here to shine the light, to empower the journey. We're kind of the possible street lights that, come on if it's a little dim out there. And so that's, I don't know if that was at all helpful, but that's how I kind of see it.
Always, Sharon, when you speak to presence, you embody that so much in how you live and how you show up. Wherever you are activated and embodying your presence, and you're such a beautiful illustration of that to anyone who comes into your experience. And I want to just add to that there's this there's a number of things that are coming through me as I'm listening to both of you, all of you speaking, and also the most recent transmission that I received yesterday that I haven't published yet, that will come out next weekend, and what the guides are saying. But they first take me back, as I'm listening to you all, is that we did enter the cycle of separation. So however people track that, the Mayans, count the cycles 26,000 years ago, right? Time is interesting. Time is a construct itself. So whether it was 26,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, whenever it was, we as a collective agreed to this dream of separation. And now, it's become so clear. And like you said, Paul, about the astrology and all the cosmological information, you eventually feel it more than you need to go research it and track it and try and live by what you're tracking instead of live by the feeling of it. And I know that many of us are aware, and we can feel the separation that this world has been in, right? And now it is a time of union. It is a time of coming back to union. So while the crumbling may feel, maybe it's foreign to people, or they don't understand the context for it, or they don't understand the bigger picture of it. Well, we experienced the reverse of this when we were in union, and then we all had a cataclysmic fall in our own ways into this lower density realm. So we've been embodying the separation consciousness, which is kind of the anomaly of our divinity, of our divinity codes. And now, while the world is shaking again, there's all these quakings in systems and organizations and belief systems, and on every level of our being. What is very natural is that we are coming home into this place of union. And I think many of us are tapping into, or getting downloads, or experiencing through our feelings, however we're experiencing it, and whatever level of awakeness we're in, is that we are being summoned back to union. And then I wanted to also talk about, in the most recent transmission that I've just received, that's coming out soon. And I don't have it near me. I'm looking at my desk and thinking, do I have it? Can I read from it? I can't. So, and as a channel, this information comes through me. I'm the conduit, as you all know. You've experienced this, but I don't remember exactly. So I'm going to do my best to share this piece, because I think it's really important. It's obviously coming in here now. They were sharing this understanding that Adam and Eve, if we spiritually trace all our ancestry back to that seed point, that when, as a collective, we needed a mother and father, a physical mother and father in this realm, right, to make the decision that would help us descend into this experience. They essentially formed a contract with the serpent, who offered the apple right? And the serpent was offering, you can have this, or, and they were knowing what God's guidance was because they were one with it, right? Whatever that was in the Garden of Eden, they knew who they were. They knew the guidance, they knew how to be in that realm. But the serpent came in offering a different experience, right? And we accepted our physical earthly parents, if you will, if we just, whether it's metaphor, whether it's absolute truth, whether we all link ourselves back to these souls who made these choices. But we've been carrying the seeds of Adam and Eve in our consciousness of these separated choices. And now we have to rise and return back and surrender our little will, right, to the divine will. And at the time of the apples offering, they were offered this little will to separate from God's divine will. So we're in this reversal process, much like you're describing, Paul, and how that magnetism, and we've been guided, what is it, the masculine informing the feminine instead of the feminine informing the masculine. We've been in this role reversal, this spiritual reversal, and even that's what brings about the amnesia, right, and the spiritual astigmatism, that we're in this world and we don't even understand who we are. And here we are now in this time of this great mystery, this biblical event, this timeline of coming home to ourselves. And yes, we're going to feel the squeeze. Many of us have been feeling the squeeze of that for so long, and the density of that. And Nancy, what you're saying in your own chart of how that showed up for you, and it is going to show up uniquely. And we are in this time of like the floods of Noah. To me, I think there's some physical floods. I don't know if any of you are seeing this, but in China and there was Canada, I think, was experiencing some floods. I'm seeing floods. Flooding is happening with water. But and water's emotions, right? And then there's the spiritual energy in the emotions. But we are how much percent, 90%, whatever percent water we are. The floods are happening from the inside out. Right? Inside us, there's a flood of memory, of like truth that has to come to the surface of stuff we buried. And I'd imagine these planets like Pluto that show up in our charts, but show up in the cosmology, we can't shove the shadow of our little will choices under the rug anymore. It has to come up and out so that we are witnessing the totality of the choices and the vibrations and the themes and the threads that we have chosen and lived through time, but now they're not designed to define us. And in this particular transmission that just came through recently is somehow the understanding, the way I'm feeling it right now, but there's a lot of parcels of energy they gave to us, was that there was a contract, that we kind of had this energetic contract with the serpent, that we were going to go into this experience, but there is this leaving of that contract. There is the death of the ego contract with the serpent. And we are the Adam and Eves, and we are the Noahs going through this. So the Adam and Eve is the contract, and we're the Noahs who have the skills, these biblical beings that we are, these ascended masters that we truly are. We are nullifying that contract. So in your language, Paul, that I loved, that, what did you say? The supremacy of the ego. Like, we are not going to give it the power that it once had. We are nullifying the supremacy at this point to lead and rule over us, where divinity is us. And that is how, right, the light reigns, but it's not being ruled and lauded over by anything. It just is the beingness that we're truly meant to be. And that was an interesting concept for me to see deeper, because of course they showed the energy of that, of like nullifying the contract. We, as all the offspring of that Adam and Eve energy, are going to go through, it sounds like in the mystery of the cross, our moment where we lay it down. We lay down the contract that these, that our ancestral parents made at that precipice of choice. We wanted the cycle of separation, and now we don't want the cycle of separation. But more importantly, it's not just not wanting the cycle of separation, we desire union. So we are choosing union, and that means we will go through the death, that crucifixion of the contract itself. And that is a very powerful energy that brings us to presence, right?
I wanted to make this comment, and it kind of touches on something each and every one of you has said. It kind of integrates it. first of all, he mentioned all of us being crucified and that idea of this grand cross happening. And then he also talked about a trine, a grand trine happening at the same time. So typically trines are easy energies. Think of them as like your natural gifts, things that are unintentional. We don't even notice we have them because they're so easy. They're like our gifts or just a very easy flowing energy. And the cross, especially a grand cross, isn't, right? So it's not just these opposing energies. Think of them as antagonizing each other. So they really stimulate you into action, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, but there's a lot of movement with it because it's so abrasive that you feel like you have to respond. So this, I thought of this when Sharon was speaking because she was talking about presence. And I think part of what the idea of us, everybody being crucified right now, is that all of those easy energies aren't going to work for you anymore. You have to be intentional about it, right? And with that intentionality that being crucified brings forth, you have to think about it. It's not this easy gift anymore. You have to think about all this antagonism, these antagonistic energies you're feeling, and come to an intentional place with it. And that speaks to that idea of presence that Sharon was speaking about. And so I think that that's exactly what you're talking about, Marie, is that you can't just be where you are because you ended up there anymore. What we're feeling right now, if you have not been spurned into action, once again, whether it's mental or physical or emotional action, this energy will certainly bring you to that point if you're being intentional about it.
Right.
Yeah. You also talked about Chicken Little, and I thought I always loved that story when I was a kid. And you brought up something in that was like profound. I never realized that there was such a great depth to the story. Maybe that's why I liked it as a kid. But what fell on Chicken Little's head was an acorn, right? So the acorn fell on the Chicken Little's head and the sky was falling. And then you went on to say about how the acorn represents a seed, and there's all this potential that is in that seed. So it's called the process of individuation, where the seed grows into a mighty oak, right? So until somebody knocks you on the head, or until somebody kind of focus you in the right direction, you would never go through the process. So in this plane of consciousness, adversity always drives it. So it always drives ascension, and that's one of the things that people don't get. Instead of looking at things and go, and being worried about it, ask yourself, what's the universe trying to teach you? Because something good will manifest from everything that's happening, one way or another. So that is a process, and it's arduous at the beginning. And when you start catalyzing these things, it's always difficult at the beginning. But that's one of the things that Jung taught. He said, it's the process of individuation. I also called it active imagination catalyzes it. We somehow or another, I think that man should have been somebody that we talk about every single day, because those were the gifts that he gave us. And what we're trying to do, and what he talked about, and many, many, many others talked about, is we're now tasked. Our task now is to create a new function of soul. We're supposed to create another function of soul. So we're now creating ourselves. We're reconfiguring ourselves. We're doing it through this process. And it starts out always the same as a little acorn, but grows into this mighty oak. You are pre-configured to do this. Everyone has the capacity to do this. And I think that these events are going to help to catalyze that, to help to get us to that point. But you have to want to do it. And if you don't, you are going to have a really hard time fighting against these forces. But as Nancy said, there's a trine that's there. And the trine is there for a reason, not only to support us, but to just fall into it. Like you say, Marie, just take a breath. The process is as easy as taking a breath. There's no mechanism. There's no, there's nothing that you need to know. You already have it within you to do this. It's just letting go. That's the only thing that you have to do, is let go and let nature take its course, let yourself manifest into your greatest potential, because it's all there. It's all genetically programmed into that acorn. It's all there. If you just let go, that's how it's going to manifest.
So I've been feeling this energy too, as we've all been talking. Is I think Wayne Dyer's the one who said it, where we go through this process of dying while we're alive. And I think it is this process of dying to the version of ourselves that we've understood ourselves to be, to open up to that divine blueprint that is who we've always been, but we couldn't see when we identified more with the supremacy of the ego. And then there's the contracts that come into things. And so there is this crucifixion energy, and many of us would consider ourselves somewhere in that awakening process have felt the heat of what that, alchemical process is. When we've been summoned in, there's been some catalyzing experience at some level where we have been summoned to go through this burning away of all that is not true, right? Of all the aspects of us that are not the true and most aligned version of ourselves with source. And for many people, COVID was that catalyzer. Many people, in whatever ways it affected people, that it challenged people to look at their belief systems about schooling their kids or their jobs or whatever it might be, or health in general. Just the fear around all of that has been a catalyzer. But this biblical event that my language is biblical just because they've given me so many messages about Noah, but this celestial, this astrological event that's this grand cross feels like it's going to take us into the experience at some level to burn away those illusions. And no one is going to be immune, and we are all going to experience it in our own ways. And some people may work hard to not see, they're going to be looking for some rug to stuff it under, but it is a celestial event, and it's bigger than COVID. Like, it's bigger than anything that we could name in this world, right? That is causing division in our lives, inside ourselves, the wrestling of the wolves. This is so much bigger that it will be clear that it's bigger. And I think that's why some people have said this is a biblical moment. And we can say this is an epic moment, that there's something way bigger than all the things we could turn to look at and blame. It's because of this that I'm feeling this. It's because of this pain and suffering that I'm experiencing this in our life. This is going to be something from the inside out that we're summoned to look at these things and use those soul skills and go higher, because we're going to realize that all the human tools that we have, whatever they may be, won't work in this scenario. And that's part of the death process. It's part of the yes, it's designed that way. And anybody that's had some kind of catalyzing experience, I, for one, can say that happened in my own life. And I did try all the human tools. I mean, I don't know who doesn't go to the doctor or the expert or this person outside of us that we think is going to solve this problem somehow and bring the solution. When all of those fail, most of us, that's when we have gone vertical, right, and connected with source. And in my journey, it was so clearly evident at one point in the journey that there was nothing from this world that was going to help me get through this. And this is when the seed of that acorn activated the channeling that gave me the guidance to get through that experience. That's where the guidance and the support and the empowerment and the strength came to transcend what I was in, whereas before I was just spinning my wheels. Right. And I think that's another thing people might feel, that as more and more of this mounts in their own personal experience from the inside out, because the floodwaters are within, right? As we experience this timeline, everybody's going to come to this place. And that's where we can bring maybe that bifurcation where the world has seemed so divided. We're all going to the same place. We're all going to get there in our own ways. But it is a profound time, and that gift of knowing how to surrender, what you're talking about, Sharon, when you say surrender, it's the energy to me of allowing. And when you can get in your heart center in the middle of that cross, right? And you can get into that place of allowing, then you can let this higher dimensional realm to lead everything. The light can lead us again. Union can lead us again. And until then, we can wrestle with it. We can, you know, the ego can think it's got the answers, or it'll find, you know, it will find a solution, and it has to burn itself out. It has to go through its own crucifixion to realize, I mean, I tried everything and nothing worked. And then you finally realize it's not coming from this world. And we all get to that point in the heart when we're willing to say, this is bigger than me. This is so much bigger, right? And then you say, okay, I'll accept God's hand, right? Yeah. Yeah, but sometimes we need some pain to get us there. Yeah. Yeah. It's an escort, and it can be an ally. And I think I'll stop talking here, but Paul, what you said is very wise, is that, you know, we tend to resist and not want to look at it. But in fact, that's sometimes what we summon in is the pain to be our escort to get to that next higher consciousness. And if we can see it in its inverted state, it's actually the help and the healing and the love that we've been seeking the whole time. I call those like vibrational emotional cues, that they're actually breadcrumbs in the journey. If we can recognize them, they're just in a costume that most people are trying to avoid. That's actually the hand of God that's trying to, you know, reach out to you. So
Yeah, it's a dark shadow.
Thank you. I just wanted to reinforce, Marie, what you were saying about how we're not going to be able to think our way through this. This is not thinking. And this is what we have done for a very long time. And we think that our minds have the answer, and our minds only have what is in the past. It is only using past experience, information that we have had. This is the new. It is the unknown. We have never before been in these energies and doing what we are doing. And it is not us doing it. It is our true self becoming us. We are not becoming our true self. The true self is becoming us. And that surrendering is really, it is where it was like the first step, right? We learned this, we need to surrender. What you did, you know, all the human tools you had were not going to get you what you needed. You had to get to that place so that you could open yourself up to then receive what you did need. And we have never been here before, and we can't think our way through this. It is really a feeling and a trusting and a loving ourselves through it. And that's the grand acceptance. That is really allowing people to be who they are, allowing ourselves in the moment to be who we are, and loving ourselves back so that our vessel is available for our higher self, that we are offering a vessel that is clear, that is loving, that is open, that is receptive. And that we can do by just accepting all of who we are, both the dark and the light. You know, when people say about shadow work and everything, and that is who we are that, you know, and that's what we have to embrace, is this understanding that we are everything. And once we understand that, we can be compassionate to the ones that are mirroring that to us. You know, once we can allow ourselves to be everything, to be just experience and expression, then we become whole, and then we become one. So it is a beingness that we are in now, and we're not going to be able to think our way through. We do not have the mental skills to do this. We are not, that's not where it is. It's the heart that leads. It's, as Paul said, it's intuitive. And you, Marie, also, as we know, it's the heart, it's union, and, you know, and it's here. It's time. We're doing this, whether we're conscious of it or not. It is happening. It's happening within you. It's, you know, and it's all happening in divine time. in divine time. Each one of us journey is perfect and beautiful, and in divine timing, all will unfold exactly how it's meant to be. And so I just, everything that, everybody said is so, I'm integrating it in, and the words are just something to occupy our minds, but the light that is streaming, the wisdom that is flowing is available to anybody who is open to receive it. Whether they, agree with this belief or idea or whatever, what is flowing is available. And it's all, of love. And I thank you all, because it's beautiful to hear the wisdom that is being shared.
Thank you, Sharon. We are feeling more and more, aren't we? It's not the words themselves, but it's the feeling, it's the vibration and the sounds in them.
As you talk, as everybody's talking, I feel it. It's energetic. I'm receiving it. It's just flowing in my throat. My heart is expanding, and my mind can get in the way sometime, but I'm feeling I'm feeling you all. And it is expanding me. I am expanding. So I know it's available if you are open for it,
Yeah, and I think that's the way of divine knowledge, that's what sentience is. We feel it to know it, right? And we can again see the polarity and the kind of upside down, inside out world we've been living in that has become the norm. But it is also simultaneously an illusion we're leaving, but you leave the illusion by raising your consciousness. It's not like you pack your bag and you get on a boat and you can go somewhere on this planet to get away from the illusion. Wherever you go, there you are. So you bring your consciousness with you. And I wanted to then maybe Paul and Nancy, maybe if you guys want to round this out, are there any last words that you guys want to share before we close this out today?
And again, the alignment is really incredible. The only way I can describe it is intentional to the season, to the moment. Both alignments, to see one grand trine is interesting. You can see grand trines, but at the exact moment that the solstice is occurring, here, this is a picture. I actually did this. I don't know if you can see it.
Yes.
And everything.
Oh, wow.
Maybe you can look at it. So everything centers right here in the bottom, which is where the moon is, right? So it all fixes on that moon. But for that to occur at that moment, because the moon moves so fast, it's just beyond probability. So there's an intention behind all of it. So I mean, it's not an opportunity, it's a fact, and it can be an opportunity for those who are welcoming a change, for those who are sick and tired of living in the illusion of the third density and of confrontation and of competition and of hierarchy and being enslaved through all this. If you're tired of that, if you're finally weary, your soul is weary, then this is the moment where we truly have a chance to move forward and ascend. And if you and this is an individual choice. I don't know if everyone is this is going to be for everyone, but they will be forced to reckon with it. Those who go with the flow, go with the path of least resistance. Those who overcome their fear, and that's the other thing I was going to say, is you're going to in one way or another be forced to reckon with your shadow forces. You're going to be forced to reckon with the summation of your karma, who you were. And that's what's holding virtually everyone back. So this is the opportunity to finally face that, and that's the doppelganger, that's the shadow. And, if you never have done that, it could be scary, but you have to forgive yourself and you have to forgive all of those who've trespassed against you. And this is the moment where we can move forward if we understand that we're going through, at least from a metaphorical perspective, a second death through a crucifixion.
Right.
If I may, I as well had some closing thoughts. You know, part of what I do in my counseling work is try to help people sit with the uncomfortable, right? And so as we're moving forward, it's easy to feel a little apprehensive or hesitant because it will be uncomfortable. And if we go into it knowing it's going to be uncomfortable and trying to be non-judgmental about it, saying, you know, not associating being uncomfortable with bad and being comfortable with good, just going into it saying this is going to happen, let it unfold, let it be. I can sit with the uncomfortable and see what happens, right? If we're open to it as potentially being a learning experience or a growth experience, or just as an energetic experience without judgment, it'll be easier to move forward and get out of it what our own soul is meant to get out of it. That said, I actually said to somebody earlier this week, I said, I don't mourn well. And they looked at me and they said, nobody mourns well. So I think it's also allowing for space. You know, you can look forward and you can anticipate this with, you know, letting it unfold, but still allowing space for mourning what was, right? You don't need to hold on to it. You don't need to, you know, don't grab onto it because it's not there anymore, right? And you can move forward and look forward, but also allowing space for mourning what isn't there, even though it wasn't perfect. I think it's our nature it's our human nature to stick with what we know, even when it's not comfortable, you know, and anybody that's worked with people who have experienced trauma know that it's easy to stick with what we know, even when it's not the best, right? So allow space for mourning what isn't as we move forward, recognizing that we can be open to it in a non-judgmental way, and that will be helpful.
Wow. Thank you. Beautiful. I mean, all these sentiments are helping all of our listeners, but us included, to fortify, spiritually fortify ourselves in these times. And that's ultimately, I think, what we're talking about, is that fortification, that strengthening, that finding neutrality in the presence, and that healing energy inside us is coming from the spiritual realms, right? It's coming from within. Yeah, if we can allow ourselves to be who we are and be in that place of radical acceptance, right? That unconditional acceptance helps us find our way into the neutrality when all the other looping patterns of the ego that's ready to point the finger at us, whether it's us pointing the finger at ourselves or at somebody else, you know, that is going to be its repertoire of skills and tools. It's going to want to do that to try and deal with the overwhelming pain it's in. But if we can witness that witness observer always comes in. And when we can find that place in our heart, the heart knows how to witness. The ego doesn't know how to do that, right? It's a projector. So we have to get into the heart to be the witnesser. And that's where more of that grace comes in, more of that peace comes in, and it becomes easier. But we are in this reversal process. We're having to learn how to, this is ready. It's ready to aim and fire at will. But then we have to also see that like a tsunami wave of energy and emotion and behavior that wants to come out of us, and say, wait a minute, this is that moment that they're talking about. This is that, you know, grand cross in myself expressing, and I can go into my heart center. And it may be uncomfortable because it's not a pattern that we're used to, but it becomes one. It becomes your go-to after you practice it enough. And so I want to thank you. I think June 2021 is seeding so much in humanity's consciousness on so many levels. And I think we are being summoned to learn how to listen and learn how to let go and learn how to be the brightest and best essence that we can be. And we already are. We're just letting the blueprint lead again. And that's a blueprint of light. We are these blueprints of this divinity and this grace inside us. And we are going to be learning deeper and deeper lessons about how to surrender and how to allow that second death process that you're talking about, Paul, and all of us today, and to be in this presence, this place of grace. That's what presence is to me. It's grace. That is grace. Mm-hmm. inside us. So and it's going to be a journey for all of us to go to those deeper layers of grace, which means it's going to be messy. There's going to be some moments where it's messy, and we can still find grace in the mess. That's when you're really on the spiritual path, is when you can open to grace, when kind of that level of some kind of disaster is going on inside you. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for joining me. I want to thank all of our listeners. I want to welcome everybody to find us, at YouTube at Whole Soul Mastery, and Color the Magic, and find these videos for your own fortification. We're offering words, we're offering some of our own insights, but we're offering frequency. This is a frequency of faith. This is a frequency of grace that we're channeling through in these connections today. And I want to thank you for joining us. And if you're here, there's something in your soul that was resonating or summoning in these kinds of messages to help in that preparation of your presence process that I think we're all in. And until next time, we'll see you. Blessings, everyone. Blessings.